Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Thursday, December 4th, 2025. This company charges disabled vets millions, even after VA said it's likely illegal. Continued. They called me relentlessly, telling vets 3 times a day to pay up. After Miranda Cardenas submitted his claim through Trajectory VA, requested additional evidence from his medical providers to make decisions on his claim. He said Trajectory refused to help him gather the additional records. And he spent hours calling his providers and gathering documentation. Then, when his claim was successful, Trajectory billed him more than $12,000. Miranda Cardenas paid the company $1,300, but refused to settle the balance because he wound up doing so much work on his claim himself. He told NPR the company has been pursuing him aggressively to collect on the outstanding amount. They were calling just about every day, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a day. Miranda Cardenas told NPR, "I said, don't be hounding me for stuff. You didn't do what you needed to do. I don't feel that it's right for me to pay you what you're claiming that I need to pay you." Trajectory told NPR in a statement that Miranda Cardenas was fully informed about the nature of our support. "They called me relentlessly," said Dwayne, a Navy veteran who had a similar experience. He said Trajectory pursued him for the payment for 3 years and only recently stopped calling. He didn't want to use his last name because he fears a renewed onslaught of collection emails and phone calls. Dwayne said Trajectory wasn't responsible for his ratings because his initial claim through the company was denied. He said he hired an attorney to appeal with VA. When the appeal was successful, Dwayne said Trajectory sent him a bill for $3,600. "It used to be 3 times a day calling," said Dwayne, "just consistent barrages of calls." Trajectory's invoice and collection staff told NPR that they often fielded daily torrents of angry calls and emails from upset veterans facing a bill they didn't feel was fair. An invoicer said, "I would get emails back. You guys did not help. Like angry emails. I did this on my own." So essentially, sometimes we were billing people for increases that we didn't even help them get. Another former staffer reported there was so much turnover because who wants to be yelled at by veterans all day? She told NPR was pressured to hit aggressive collections quotas, and Trajectory incentivized speed with bonus structure that made up the majority of her paycheck. She worked a list of up to 150 clients daily, and the conversations with vets were not easy. "I didn't know that I was gonna be like a debt collector, banging on people's doors, 'Give me your money.' Across all industries, individuals working in collections are routinely subjected to verbal abuse, frustration, and anger from customers. Trajector told NPR this is considered a challenge and frequent reality of the profession, and collections agents often become the involuntary targets for a customer's negative feelings, making the constant exposure to hostility an expected part of their job. Several vets NPR spoke to said they were never turned over to a third-party debt collector or reported to the credit bureaus by Tractor. And several former employees told NPR this policy was quietly acknowledged by management. One former invoice said that when I started wondering, are we supposed to be doing this? They don't want it in the press that third-party collection agencies are collecting on disabled veterans, a former employee in Trajector's collection department said. Any collection outreach can feel overwhelming and take client feedback very seriously, Trajector told NPR. Our communications are designed, monitored, and audited to ensure that they are professional and respectful. Legal experts in the field of debt collection regulation told NPR it's possible that Trajector decided not to involve third-party debt collectors because doing so would open the collectors to lawsuits from veterans who may feel the debt is legally dubious. Trajector's contracts require veterans to agree to binding arbitration, which prevents them from filing a lawsuit against the company. Experts say lawsuits monitoring the company could draw scrutiny to its business practices. Congress weighs actions. 2 decades ago, Congress changed the federal law surrounding veterans. Disability claims. In 2006, the U.S. was at war in Iraq, and there was a feeling vets needed more options to navigate an increasingly complex claim system. Against the backdrop, Congress voted to eliminate the criminal penalties for breaking the law against charging veterans for help with initial disability. Claims. It was a half measure at best, and lawmakers never resolved this contradiction. The ban is on the books. there are no penalties to enforce it. Entrepreneurial veterans leapt into the legal gray area, realizing they could help fellow vets make good money. The number of these claims consulting outfits has exploded over the last 10 years. The VA has little recourse besides sending warning letters. NPR and our partner, the nonprofit newsroom, The War House, obtained letters the VA sent to 40 claims companies, ranging from companies with hundreds of employees to one-person shops. The larger claim companies appeared to be ignoring these letters with impunity. Trajectory received 2 such letters in January 2017 and January 2022. In the 2017 letter, VA Chief Counsel David J. Behrens quoted a litany of marketing materials from Trajector, then called VetComp and Penn Medical Consulting, that strongly suggest that your organization is unlawfully assisting in the preparation, presentation, and prosecution of claims. Before VA, by assisting in preparing claims, you and your organization are violating the laws governing accreditation. Barron signed off with a warning to Hill. By law, you individually and your organization must immediately cease all preparation of and assistance in claims for VA benefits. Trajectory responded to both letters to VA, contending that it wasn't breaking the law. The company told NPR in a statement, "We take any communication from VA seriously." When these letters were received, they promptly responded in writing, and nearly 4 to 8 years since then have received no reply from VA. The company also told NPR that its work falls within laws and regulations that guarantee a veteran's right to submit private medical evidence and require VA to consider private medical documentation. VA is not a law enforcement agency, but it is fully committed to preventing bad actors from taking advantage of veterans, said VA Press Secretary Pete Casp in a statement to NPR. When VA sees signs of fraud or suspicious behavior, it works with the appropriate law enforcement authorities to protect veterans, families, caregivers, and survivors. NPR obtained through a public records request more than 50 complaints about Trajector, reported to the Office of the Attorney General in Florida, the state where Trajector is based. Attorney General James Ute office declined to comment on whether it was investigating or taking any action against the company. Retired Army Colonel Paul Cantwell served as an assistant director at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, leading the Office of Service Member Affairs. He told NPR he's aware of such complaints from veterans who felt taken advantage of by claims assistant companies. If I still ran the Office of Service Members Affairs, these complaints would be at the top of the priority list and would be taken very seriously, Cantwell said. VSOs, the VFW in particular, are pushing lawmakers to regulate the claims industry with the slogan, "Don't feed the sharks." One industry side, the field has grown large enough that claims companies formed a trade organization led by Peter O'Rourke, a former VA official in the first Trump administration. Competing bills have percolated in Congress for several years, and claims company executives have been called before the lawmakers as recently as this year. One bill would reinstate criminal penalties. This bill, called the Guard VA Benefits Act, is favored by several of the oldest VSOs, which offer claims assistance for free. Some of the larger claims companies favor the competing bill. Called the Choice for Veterans Act, which would regulate the business and cap the charges at $2,500 in its current draft. But congressional staffers told NPR to set the fee cap is contentious. Some states have enacted a patchwork of laws to regulate how claims companies operate locally. Last year, Louisiana adopted a version of the Choice Act, while this summer Alabama passed a Guard Act like ban on the claims companies. VA continues to examine this issue, said Casper Woods. We also want to make sure veterans have choices, particularly if they aren't happy with whatever options might be available to them for free. The companies argue they allow vets to vote with their feet and pay for assistance if they need extra help. Millions of Americans simply pay for help filing their taxes, for example, though some of the companies can charge vets 10 or 20 times what they might pay for tax help. And there's a wide range with companies charging vets $20,000 or more in some cases, and others charging as little as $1,250. In no world should charging $10,000 for a VA claim. It doesn't cost that, says Lucas Minor, the founder and CEO of Vet Claims AI, an Austin, Texas-based startup. Vet Claims AI charges a flat upfront fee of $1,250 with a money-back guarantee. Simon told NPR his company rarely spends more than 5 hours assisting a vet with their claim. A 33-year-old founder said the Guard Act goes too far in limiting veterans' choice, but that he supports fee caps to shield vets from exploitation. Congress may decide to impose such limits on claim companies, but until then, lower-cost startups like Simoners could put downward pressure on fees being charged by more established firms like Trajector. I often describe myself as combat capitalist, he told NPR. I believe that capitalism works for a reason. I think the best solution will prevail. A mission to help vets that workers say eroded over time. Like many of these firms, Trajector was started by people who've been frustrated by the VA disability benefits system. Hill, a Navy veteran and entrepreneur, co-founded the company in 2014 with Gina Erb, a nurse and former VA medical examiner running a small claims consultancy from her home. After Urb helped with his own VA claim, Hale pitched her a vision to use technology and automation to multiply her impact. They started the company with a few staff working with Hill's spare bedroom, an Urbe's dining room table in Gainesville, Florida. There was plenty of demand from vets who wanted help. Trajector, originally called VetComp and Penn Medical Consulting, acquired smaller firms and by 2021 employed a global workforce for more than 1,300 employees across offices in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. I was inspired, one early employee who no longer works at Trajector told NPR. When he started working with Ruby, she remembers they were quickly helping scores of vets, drastically improving their lives. All of a sudden, they're getting this disability check that's just going to turn everything around for them. And I'm like, wow, that's real power. As Trajector grew, though, former workers say things started to change. None of the 11 former employees NPR interviewed for this story wanted to use their names, citing fear of retribution from the company. Many said, as time went on, the company focused too much on maximizing profits. All of a sudden, our calls became all about collection. An early employee said, they used to be about gathering other information and moving people through the claims process, and then it became about following up. Did you win? Did you get a check? Can you help us out? Trajector Inc., parent company of Trajector Medical, had plans to make a public offering, filing a draft registration with the CEC in August 2021. But in January 2022, they withdrew the paperwork. Former workers who spoke to NPR said the company's rank and file employees want to help veterans, but many said that's been hard. You can't have this many customers that are upset, said one former manager. Innate, nonspecific immunity. Physical barriers. Skin, dry, dead, keratinized cells, continual shedding. Has a low pH. Mucosa, fluids wash over, cilia sweep clean, mucus traps, and continual shedding. Also at the low pH. Chemical defenses. Low pH, high salt on the skin, many enzymes, and antimicrobial peptides. An example is lysosome, digests peptoglycan in tears, snot, etc. Dendritic cells, in skin, mucosa, and gut, reside just under the epithelial layer, and phagocytose microbes. Secrete signals to activate inflammatory response. Also secrete signals to activate the acquired immune system. The inflammatory response. Inflammation is the body's first reaction to tissue damage and or invasion by bacteria. Although it is good in limited doses, the host tissues are usually damaged somewhat, so that after repeated inflammation or during systemic infections, your immune system can cause severe damage to your own body. The damage is caused by white blood cells squeezing out of blood vessels and by reactive oxygen species that leak out of phagocytic leukocytes. In addition, systemic infections can cause system-wide inflammation, while high fever, system-wide inflammation, or septic shock. Extensive plasma leakage can cause dangerous drops in blood pressure, while high fevers can fry brains. A particular risk for septic shock is if LPS is released from large numbers of gram-negative bacteria. The goals of inflammatory response are to seal any breach in the body's physical barriers, contain and kill bacteria, remove damaged tissue, and restore tissues to its previous shape. Signals that start the inflammatory response. Tissue damage, an example is exposed collagen, local mediators released by damaged host cells, bacterial surface molecules recognized by the innate immune system, called PAMPs. Example, LPS, LTA, PG, fibrin, and flagellin. Local mediators released by dendritic cells when bound to PAMPs. Chemical signals during inflammation. Local mediators are released by damaged host cells and by leukocytes, such dendritic cells, and the macrophages that arrive later on the scene. The signaling pathways for inflammation are complicated, but include substances you have heard of like histamines and prostaglandins. You don't need to know these names. They lead to the recognizable symptoms of inflammation, including redness, swelling, pain, and local heat or systemic fever. They lead to the recognizable symptoms of inflammation, including on a cell and molecular level, the signals cause vasodilation, increasing blood flow to the area, increase the gaps between endothelial cells and blood vessel walls, increase the temperature locally in the infected tissue, or cause fever in the whole body. This activates immune cells and slows bacterial growth. A decrease in pain threshold, attract white blood cells, enhance the inflammatory response in other ways. Widening junctures between the endothelial cells and blood vessel walls. Blood plasma leaks through, causing edema, swelling, and releasing soluble blood proteins, including clotting proteins and complement proteins. Lymphocytes, white blood cells, squeeze through. Some proteins from the plasma. Clotting proteins forms clots that seal off broken skin and blood vessels. Can contain bacteria and prevent them from spreading. Complement proteins a group of 30 or so different proteins that signal to lymphocytes, white blood cells, to chemotax towards sites of damage. Tag bacteria for phagocytes and make the phagocytic process easier. Form pores in bacterial membranes. Phagocytic immune cells engulf bacteria and debris from damaged host tissue. Dendritic cells reside in tissues like skin, mucosa, and gut epithelia. Neutrophils arrive at the site of infection within minutes. Before infection, they circulate in the blood, use chemical signals to chemotax to the site of the infection, and they only live around one day. High levels of neutrophils in the blood are a sign of an active infection. Macrophages only appear after one day, longer lived than neutrophils, and present during chronic infections. Before infection, they exist in the blood, lymph in an inactive, immature form. Intracellular pathogens live inside the macrophages. Phagocytosis. The phagocyte recognizes a bacteria that needs to be endocytosed. Recognition is due to binding directly to bacteria-specific surface molecules, example LPS, PG, flagellin, and or by indirect binding to complement proteins or antibodies that are bound to the bacteria's surface. The phagocyte then engulfs the bacteria. The phagosome fuses with the lysosome to form the phagolysosome. In the phagolysosome, bacteria are killed by the drop in pH to 3 or 4. Hydraulic enzymes, reactive oxygen species that do oxidative damage, like steal electrons and break bonds. Producing reactive oxygen species requires a lot of electrons from NADH. Glycolysis is upregulated after engulfment of a bacteria. Iron can promote the formation of hydroxyl radicals. Hydroxyl radicals are particularly lethal reactive oxygen species. But given that iron is required for their formation, and that iron is also a limited nutrient for bacterial growth, a phagocytic cell must carefully control how much iron it imports into the cell. Reactive oxygen species and nitrogen oxide are made by phagocytic cells, but only when the phagocytic cell is stimulated by the helper T cells. It is important to ensure that these dangerous chemicals are made only when there is a true foreign pathogen around, because the ROS leak out of the host cells and damage surrounding host tissue.